You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and kick us off.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. Excited to introduce today's guest, Joe Landolina. Joe is a 2023 Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree and the CEO and co-founder of Cresilon, a Brooklyn-based biotechnology startup developing and manufacturing innovative hemostatic medical technologies. Joe is also the creator behind VETIGEL, a revolutionary plant-based hemostasis gel being used by veterinarians to instantly stop and control bleeding when treating animals for both routine and complex surgical procedures, as well as traumatic wounds. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Forbes 30 Under 30. How did you get on the list? And tell us about that experience. That's pretty cool. Congratulations on that.
Definitely. I mean, someone nominated me. I actually don't know who put the nomination in on my behalf, but it was such a great honor to be honored by Forbes alongside so many other innovators in the space, both in healthcare, which is where I was nominated, as well as the other verticals.
That's awesome, Joe. So tell us a little bit about the company and maybe the origin story, how you got into the vet field. And it's a really innovative product. I was saying before we started recording that I've seen the product and the demo, and definitely can tell you that I've been grossed out by watching the demo as a non-veterinary professional, somebody auxiliary to the space. But yeah, tell us a little bit about how it all started.
Definitely. So I got a bit of an early start. I started Cresilon 13 years ago. And when 13 years ago, I was 17 years old. I was a bit unorthodox as a teenager. My grandfather was an ex-pharma executive who started a winery. And so the day that I learned how to walk, I was in a chemistry lab doing research. And I was experimenting around with two biopolymers or long chains of sugar that come out of algae and trying to do something completely different. But one day I found the precursor to what we have today as VETIGEL, which is a product that stops any bleeding from neurosurgical bleeding to traumatic bleeding like gunshot wounds nearly instantly without the need to apply pressure. And over the last 13 years, Cresilon has been able to commercialize that around the world. And today, Cresilon is the only biomanufacturer in the 5 boroughs of New York. And as a New Yorker myself, that's something that I'm very proud of.
I thought that you were going to say that your grandfather had a winery, so at 17 you're already drinking wine with him. Maybe you did, but we're not going to say that on the podcast. So
exactly.
He's an American, not a European like yourself, Ivan.
Yeah, I know, but he could go to Canada at least at 19, start drinking. So
18 in Montreal or 18 in Quebec.
Is it longer drive? You can just cross the border here and be okay. But that's for a different podcast. So, how did you stumble upon? I'm imagining invention of penicillin when the wind blew on the petri dish and then suppressed the growth of penicillin. What happened? Like, how did you Oh, I'm making one with my grandfather, and then what did you have? Like a dog bleeding nearby? Like what happened?
We're going to need more. We're going to need more.
We need more information.
Definitely. So I was maybe not the best kid. And so my early experiments in the lab did not make my parents terribly thrilled. And so they cut a deal with me, which was to go learn research anywhere that would let me in. And so when I was about 13 or 14 years old.
Other than your kitchen, right?
Exactly. And so one explosion too many. They sent me to Columbia University to do a summer of research when I was about 13 or 14 years old. And that lab was working on cartilage regeneration. So it was this concept that you could take a plant-based material and the patient's stem cells, put the stem cells into the plant-based scaffold and have those stem cells differentiate into cartilage that could then go back into the knees of an athlete. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And as you do as a teenager, I decided to go home and make cartilage myself. But no one would sell the types of reagents that you needed to do that type of research to a winery lab. And so I was effectively on my own. If I needed something, I had to either go out into nature and make it or be able to find another way to get done what I needed to get done. And so needless to say, I was a young chemist that wasn't very good at chemistry yet. And so I got nowhere near cartilage. And so out of this first failed experiment, what I was left with was this very thick paste that, if nothing else, would stick to my skin and it wouldn't let go until I wanted it to. And I had this idea, which was, what if I took something like that and used it to plug up a bullet wound? And so the initial concept wasn't actually to make an animal health hemostatic device. It was to make something for a soldier or for a major gunshot wound or stabbing, at least to stabilize a patient long enough to get from point A to point B. And by the time that we came up with that, I was then a freshman at NYU's engineering school in New York. And we entered that into their business plan competition and won, and that gave us just enough capital to move forward. And a few years later, when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, that was 2012, one of my interns at the time was working with a zoo, and due to the damage at the zoo, a patient died or an animal died because they just weren't able to stop the bleeding in time. And it gave us this idea, which was that we should go to AVMA and start talking to vet surgeons and see if this could be a good fit. And it turns out that it was. And so from 2012 onward, we started developing VETIGEL primarily for the animal health market and launched that product in 2020 to fairly good feedback.
So I have many questions. So you said that you came up with the idea that you want to stop the gunshot wounds, and then are there any homeless dogs in your neighborhood left? How did you conduct the experiments? And like, it's a very specific. It's okay if you were like, okay, we're gonna do a mice experiment and do small slices and stuff, but like the gunshot wound, that's a very specific application, and that's obviously a joke. But it would be interesting to see how you conducted the experiments. And then having this success in the human field, have you tried in go back to sort of human and see if that's applicable there?
Definitely. We had a lot of luck when we were doing these tests in something called an ex vivo model. So instead of doing a gunshot or making a gunshot wound in a live patient or in an animal, which is not something we wanted to do, I was in Brooklyn, and we could get really fresh meat and really fresh blood. And so we went to our local butcher shop, and I got a 5-gallon bucket full of fresh blood and a steak. And we hooked it up to an aquarium pump. And actually, that video was online. We posted that, and it went viral back in 2012, 2013. And that helped us get a lot of the investment that started out the seed round and then eventually the Series A of the company. And we used that as the proof of concept as we started growing and getting larger. And then you're exactly right. And so we started this initially because we wanted to stop really big bleeds like gunshot wounds. And while we're doing that today in the animal health market, I mean, in fact, there's a clinic, Verg, just around the corner from our headquarters here in Brooklyn. They saved the life of a dog that had been shot with the use of VETIGEL. And so really cool application. I mean, obviously gunshot wounds and stabbings are not that common in animal health, thankfully. But our product was just approved for the first time for human use in June of this year. And we recently filed a product under the brand name TraumaGel, which will be for massive hemorrhage, things like gunshot wounds, stabbings, and so on, for both military use as well as emergency medicine use in humans. And we intend, assuming that the FDA approves that, that we'll be able to launch that next year.
Joe, this is an absolutely awesome story. It's super exciting to just listen to you kind of tell us about the origin story and then get into the details. What's next?
So I led into it a bit earlier, but the next thing for VETIGEL is that Cresilon has been selling only directly. We only have about a half dozen sales reps across the country here, and we're now opening up for distribution through proper channels. And what that means is that VETIGEL is going to get a lot more available for vets, not only here in the U.S., but also across the world. The goal is to make it so that any time that there is an incision, every time there's a surgery, VETIGEL is there not only to stop the bleed quickly, but to allow patients to recover faster and to shorten operating room times. I mean, we see that upwards of 30% of OR time can be saved by using a product that stops bleeding faster. And then beyond that, like I mentioned, we're looking forward to not only saving lives in animal health, but also saving lives in human health. And we look forward to launching our first human product in the next 12 months or so.
That's amazing. So I got a two-parter question. First is kind of go to market. I've seen you at trade shows, not yourself, but your team over the last 5 years. I could have described your product because I've watched the demo video that plays over and over on a loop so many times. I think I must have been across a booth file from you at one point. But you're an innovator. Are you still in the lab? Do you have other ideas? Is there other products that we may see the parent company come out with in the future?
So I'm a strong believer that a one product company isn't quite a company. And so one of the core tenets of Cresilon is that we were built on innovative research and doing things that weren't exactly as they were done before, trying crazy things out and hoping that they work. And we've maintained that tradition and that culture. And so while it takes a very long time to get products to market safely and to the level of quality that we expect and that we want to deliver to our customers, we're working on both through acquisition as well as through internal development, building a line of products that can support VETIGEL in the animal health market as well as in the human markets. But one thing that I'm a strong believer on is that animal health has a major deficiency in the surgical niche or in the product niche in the human space that we call biosurgery. So these are the things that help a surgeon do their jobs better when they're operating on a patient. There aren't many technologies that can be delivered at the correct price point to be taken up by the animal health market. And that's something that and our materials effectively grow on trees, and they quite literally grow on trees. And as a result, that allows us to deliver our products at a price point that allows uptake into the animal health market while bringing greater than standard of care quality and efficacy to the end user.
Joe, you found the money tree.
And that's what I was about to say. It's like there is the tree that grows money on it. Um,
And Joe is the only guy we know that knows where it's at.
yeah. So that is phenomenal story, and I just want to kind of delve a little further into what's your experience like, and what do you like more? Because from a lab and being in the best sense of this word, an absolute nerd, and then building your path from that to a very successful company, very successful and needed product. Which part do you like more? And which part excites you more, the lab and creating of the product, or building the company around it, creating the vision and the strategy, and then kind of running with that path? Because maybe you can do both, but at some point maybe it's sort of a one or the other. So what do you like more, and what specifically you like about one and the other?
So I always describe myself as more of a cook than a baker, meaning that I have really good intuition. I can mix some things together and get where I want to go, but I'm not one for writing a recipe or following a recipe. And so I've been lucky to have hired a team of far better scientists and engineers than me to get products like VETIGEL and TraumaGel over the finish line and into the market. I mean, really, over the last 13 years, the bulk of my time has been spent growing the business, making sure that that we have the right people here that are better suited and have more experience than me in getting these products over the finish line. But I've really enjoyed seeing that full product life cycle, meaning working with the customers, working with our surgeons, and being able to help deliver products that can really change the way and improve the way that they deliver medicine and deliver results to their patients.
Tell us more about if it's not a trade secret, what are you looking to apply? Are there new products that will help in different situations? Are there bandages that have the vet gel in it? What would be the actual application? And who, if people are not familiar with it, is it, because it sounds like critical care and stuff like that, but you said the surgical application. So what are practical things where the general practice, maybe mobile, maybe ER, like who would be those core customers for you that want to see and try this product?
Definitely. The beauty of VETIGEL is there's this level of universality over the use cases of where you use this product. And so in animal health, unlike in the human space, you can't tell Fido after a dental procedure to go and chew on gauze for 3 hours to stop the bleeding. And so if Fido's shaking his head and spraying blood all over the place, the pet owner is not going to be very happy at the end of the day. And so what that means is that even in simple procedures like a dental extraction, you need to keep that patient under anesthesia, which increases the risk to that patient, increases costs associated with that procedure, and lengthens time that a patient is on the table, meaning that vets are overloaded, especially post-COVID, they're more overloaded than they've ever been. And for every second, every minute that a patient is sitting on the table, that's additional time that you can't be spending treating other patients that are sitting in your waiting room. And so even for something as simple as a tiny bleed in dentistry, VETIGEL can give back a substantial amount of time to the vet. And so when we talk about the places where VETIGEL are used, right, what we call the oh crap bleeds, right, the bleeds that are spraying blood all over the place, right, those are fairly few and far between in the average vet practice, right? And so you can use VETIGEL on a gunshot wound, you could use VETIGEL on a stabbing, but those are not going to be the most likely use cases. The most likely use cases are using this product for bleeds in dentistry, using this product for control of hemorrhage in simple procedures that have hemorrhage as a complication. So spays and neuters, cholecystectomies, or the removal of the gallbladder, amputations or tail amputations, lacerations, nicks, and scrapes after fighting, and the list goes on. So effectively, every single place where there is a surgery, it's very likely that a product like this can be used.
That's so fascinating and such an interesting use case. When you talked about the journey that you've been on, seed, Series A, it sounds like software. It sounds like a software journey. Me and Ivan have both built software companies, and those terms are all really familiar to us. You're the first company that we've had on the podcast where you've kind of connected what sounds like, VC funding to an actual product company. Can you tell us a little bit more about the details of how you were able to sell that through venture capital, which it sounds like you've done, and kind of where you're at in your journey? Are you guys a profitable company now? Are you going to look to raise more money and grow more? Yeah, I've got 1,000 questions like Ivan.
Definitely. So we've been very lucky. I mean, like I said, I've been running this company for 13 years, and so I've seen all of the ups and the downs of the venture market, and maybe not all of the ups and the downs, but a good number of them over the last decade plus. And we were also really lucky that in the very beginning, video content like the video that I mentioned with the steak and the aquarium pump, that created a level of virality around the technology. Especially in life sciences, it's so rare to get something where you can take a 20-second clip with no audio and no text. And after watching it, I mean, you had the misfortune of watching our gory videos on that loop at a conference. But when you see that, you understand exactly what the product does and you understand what the market potential is. And that meant that our videos in aggregate, by 2015, it had over 140 million views across multiple platforms. We had about 8,000 investors reach out to us. And then every single time that we needed to go out for more capital, more or less that investor base continued to reinvest. And so we've done 6 private rounds of funding, which totaled just over $100 million raised to date. And that was used primarily to build our own manufacturing. So Cresilon has about 30,000 square feet of aseptic processing manufacturing, so vaccine grade clean rooms that we have here in Brooklyn, New York, and to build out not only the sales force for animal health, but to push the development through for the human side of the business. And I think that one other note on that is just that we were very lucky in that we have both the human business and the animal health business, which means that we were able to avail ourselves not only of investors interested in the animal health sector, but also of investors that were interested in the human applications of the technology.
It's just such an incredible story. I guess last question, we've got every different type of listener that you can imagine. We've got large corporate groups, we've got individual veterinarians, we've got a lot of innovators. There's a lot of tenacity behind your story, Joe. And the question I have for you is, do you have any advice to other entrepreneurs that are out there trying to solve really hard problems? Maybe blowing up their parents' houses at an early age?
I mean, I think that the best piece of advice, and something that we luckily started from the very beginning, is that you can have the coolest piece of technology in the world, but if it doesn't solve a need for your customers, it's not going to move that far. And so my biggest piece of advice is, especially in animal health, one of the beauties of this market, and the reason why I love the fact that we entered the animal health market ahead of the human market, is that there's so much more customer access available to a young company than you find in the human space. You can go to a conference, you can have conversations with your end users, you can get them using your product and telling you what they like, but also what they hate about the product. And you can have a much faster innovation cycle where your engineers can iterate and change and make sure that you're really taking those customer needs into heart as you're going through this process. Because if you don't do that, especially in life sciences where there's a decade plus in development, if you only talk to the customer once and then not again for 10 years, odds are you're going to end up somewhere far away from where your customers want you to be at the end of that journey.
That makes a ton of sense, man.
I heard this conversation. It was, I think it was professor at MIT, but he was in some sort of a business or finance conference in Russia. And he said that the difference between, let's say, US and Russia. So Soviet Union invented tons of stuff. There's so many inventions that they came up with, but all of that was used either for military or went nowhere to commercialize it. And most of the things that were invented in US and capitalist countries, that they were converted into a product and delivered to customers, they became innovation. So I love that definition between the invention and innovation, is that innovation is invention that was taken to market and succeeded. Joe, this is an incredible story. This is what this podcast is about. So thank you for joining us. We always ask 2 questions at the end. One of them is, what is the book or TED Talk or YouTube video or anything that inspired you and would like to share with our listeners?
So my wife and I recently adopted a German Shepherd puppy, and so the book that has inspired me the most, but unfortunately I'm not going to have the opportunity to finish it, is German Shepherds for Dummies, and I can't finish it because the last chapter was eaten by my puppy while we were training her, and so I'm never going to get to the end, but hopefully it's good enough.
So your dog ate your homework. We'll send you a new copy of the book. That's hilarious. Joe, last question is some other innovator from the animal health space that you think we should have on the show?
Dr. Matt Morgan at Verg has been both an amazing key opinion leader that we've worked with throughout the development of VETIGEL, because he's both the chief of surgery at Verg, which is one of the largest emergency clinics in Brooklyn, but he's also an Army medic who does training for canine, and so he has such an interesting take on surgery and emergency to critical care. So I think he would be amazing to speak to.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.